The twin moons hung low over the alien forest. Casting silver light through the thick leaves, the air was still, heavy with the smell of damp earth and glowing flowers. Evan moved quietly, pushing aside hanging vines. His boots sank a little into the soft moss, and every step made a faint crunch. He had been sent to collect samples for the research base, but tonight something felt different. He had been on this planet for 3 weeks, and in that time he had never heard the sound he heard now. It was faint at first, almost like the wind through hollow wood, but then it came again, a thin, broken cry. It was not the call of any animal he had studied. It was sad, lonely, and strangely desperate. Evan stopped walking, tilting his head to listen. The cry came again, echoing between the tall trees. This time, it was closer. He felt a strange pull inside him. As if something was asking for help, he hesitated for a moment, then adjusted the strap of his bag and followed the sound. The forest seemed to close around him the deeper he went. The glowing plants dimmed, and the silver light from the moons barely touched the ground. Branches tangled above, creating a roof that blocked the sky. His breath sounded too loud in the silence. He could feel his own heartbeat in his ears. Another cry, louder now, cut through the air. It was followed by a low, pained whimper. Evan quickened his pace, pushing through a wall of giant ferns until he reached a small clearing. His eyes locked on a small figure lying on the ground. It was unlike anything he had seen before. Its fur shimmered softly in the moonlight, shifting from silver to pale blue. Its eyes, half closed, glowed faintly, like 2 tiny lanterns. It was small, barely the size of a house cat, but its long, elegant tail curled protectively around its body. One of its legs was bent at an unnatural angle, and its breathing was fast and shallow. Evan's instincts kicked in. He knelt down slowly, speaking in a low voice. "Hey, it's okay. I won't hurt you." The creature flinched at the sound, but didn't move away. It was too weak to run. He opened his field kit, pulling out a small light and a medical patch. He carefully checked the wound. It was a deep gash running along the creature's leg. The bleeding had slowed, but it was still raw. Whoever or whatever had done this was long gone. As he cleaned the wound, the creature made a soft, trembling sound. Its glowing eyes fixed on him with a strange mix of fear and trust. Evan felt an odd connection, as if this tiny alien understood what he was doing. "There you go," he whispered, gently wrapping the leg. "That should help, for now." He gave it a sip of water from his canteen. The creature hesitated, then drank slowly, its small mouth touching the edge of the bottle. For a moment, everything felt still. Then a faint crunch of leaves. Evan froze. His eyes darted to the trees. Someone or something was moving in the shadows. The sound was slow, deliberate, too heavy to be a small animal. The creature suddenly stiffened in his hands. Its ears twitched, and its eyes widened with fear. It let out a sharp, high-pitched chirp and looked past Evan's shoulder. Evan turned his head just enough to see movement between the trees. A tall figure stood there, half hidden in shadow. The silver moonlight caught on something armor, dark and gleaming. The figure stepped forward, and Evan caught a glimpse of alien markings glowing faintly across the armor's surface. Whoever it was, they were not from his research team. The creature in his arms began to tremble, pressing itself against his chest. Its glowing eyes stayed locked on the figure. Evan's grip tightened protectively. The stranger stopped just a few meters away. Silent, watching, the air between them felt heavy, charged. Evan didn't know if he was looking at a rescuer, a predator. Then, in a low, calm voice, the figure spoke. The words were in a language Evan didn't understand, but the tone was clear, demanding. Evan glanced down at the small creature. Then, back at the armored stranger, his heart pounded. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see who would make the first move, and then, without warning, Another sound broke the silence: footsteps, fast and heavy, coming from deeper in the forest. The stranger's head snapped toward the noise, and Evan felt the creature's claws gently grip his shirt. The quiet moment was over. Someone was coming, and Evan had no idea if he had just saved a harmless animal or put himself in the middle of a dangerous hunt. Evan didn't wait to see who was coming. His instincts screamed that standing still would be a mistake. He adjusted his grip on the trembling creature and moved backward, his eyes never leaving. The armored figure, the stranger, didn't follow. But they didn't step aside either. Their glowing markings seemed to pulse faintly as they watched him. The heavy footsteps were closer now, snapping branches. Splashing through shallow water somewhere ahead, Evan's mind raced. If these were hunters, then the little creature in his arms was their target, and if they caught him holding it, it would be no time to explain. The stranger turned sharply and vanished into the trees without a word, almost as if they had melted into the darkness. Evan pressed his back to a thick tree trunk, holding the creature close, his breathing slow. The air felt colder now, carrying a faint metallic scent, the kind you notice just before a storm. The footsteps stopped, replaced by a strange clicking sound. Slow at first, then faster. Shapes emerged from the forest: three figures, tall and thin. Their bodies wrapped in armor that looked grown, not made. Their helmets were like insect heads, with sharp mandibles and glowing orange eyes. Each carried a spear-like weapon that hummed with faint energy. They moved in a triangular formation. Scanning the ground, one of them stopped, head tilting. The orange eyes locked on Evan's hiding spot. The creature in his arms let out a tiny, fearful whine. Evan bit his lip, his pulse pounding. The alien soldier stepped forward, raising its weapon. Evan ducked sideways, slipping through the roots of an enormous tree. The ground here was uneven, dotted with pools of glowing water. He kept moving, his boots making almost no sound on the moss. Behind him, the clicking sound grew louder. They were following. Evan had no plan. Only one thought: put as much distance between him and those hunters as possible. The creature clung to him tightly now, its head buried against his chest. Every few seconds, it would glance over his shoulder, its glowing eyes wide with fear. A sudden flash of movement caught Evan's attention. The armored stranger from before appeared to his right. Silent and fast, they signaled to him with a sharp hand motion. Evan didn't understand, but when they pointed toward a gap between two rock walls, he decided to trust them. He sprinted for the opening, the stranger moving alongside him with fluid, almost inhuman speed. The hunters shouted something in their own language, their voices carrying a harsh, metallic tone. They reached the gap, and Evan realized it was a narrow path leading into a darker part of the forest. The stranger motioned for him to go ahead, and he did, squeezing through the space with the creature still in his arms. Behind him, the stranger dropped a small metallic sphere on the ground. It rolled once before releasing a sudden burst of bright white light. The flash lit up the trees, and the hunters let out pained screeches, their glowing eyes flickering. Evan kept running, guided only by the faint shimmer of the stranger's armor ahead. They moved deeper into the forest until the sounds of pursuit faded. The path widened, revealing a small stream of crystal-clear water. Evan stopped, trying to catch his breath. The creature peeked out from his arms, its ears twitching as if listening for danger. The stranger removed their helmet, revealing a face both alien and strangely human in shape. Sharp features, pale blue skin, and eyes that seemed to shift in color with the light. They looked at the creature first, then at Evan, and spoke in a calmer tone. Still in their own language, Evan shook his head. "I don't understand you," he said quietly. The stranger sighed, then pressed something on their armor. A faint hum passed between them, and when they spoke again, the words were in broken but clear English. "Why? You take Moonflame." Evan blinked. Moonflame. he repeated, looking down at the small creature. It tilted its head at the sound of the name. Yes, the stranger said firmly, Moonflame is royal pet. Belongs to princess. Very important. Their eyes narrowed slightly. Why you? Help. Evan shifted his weight. Because it was hurt, he said simply. Because no one else was there, the stranger studied him for a long moment. Then nodded slowly. You not hunter, they said, almost to themselves before glancing back the way they came. Hunters. We'll return before Evan could ask more. The stranger was already moving again. Signaling for him to follow, he hesitated. Looking at the dark forest around them, he could turn back toward his base. But something told him that leaving now would not end well, not for him, and not for the small life in his arms. He took a deep breath and stepped after the stranger, the soft splash of the stream fading behind them, somewhere in the distance. A low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. They moved quickly, weaving between ancient trees with roots thick. As walls, the air grew warmer, and faint lights appeared ahead. Not the soft glow of plants, but the sharp, steady brightness of something made by intelligent hands. Evan realized they were heading toward civilization, or, at least, the stranger's version of it. His grip on Moonflame tightened as the thought crossed his mind. If this was really the princess's pet, then he had just walked into something far bigger than he understood. And there was no turning back now. The lights ahead grew brighter until Evan could see they were coming from tall, thin structures built into the trees themselves. The trunks glowed faintly where alien technology merged with living wood, creating bridges, platforms, and spiral ramps. The air smelled faintly of something sweet, like honey and metal mixed together. The strangers slowed and glanced back at him, their eyes scanning him carefully before gesturing toward a narrow bridge made of woven roots. Evan stepped onto it. The surface felt alive beneath his boots. Shifting slightly with each step, the creature in his arms, Moonflame, relaxed a little, its long tail curling around his wrist as if sensing safety. At the far end of the bridge, a group of armored figures waited. Their armor sleeker than the hunters, but still intimidating. They raised their weapons as soon as they saw him, speaking quickly in a language he didn't understand. The stranger barked something back in the same tongue, their voice sharp. With authority, the guards hesitated, their glowing eyes flicking to Moonflame. One of them stepped forward slowly, almost reverently, and made a soft clicking sound toward the creature. Moonflame chirped in response, but clung tighter to Evan. The stranger said something else, and the guards stepped aside, allowing them to pass. Evan felt every eye on him as they crossed another platform. It seemed like word of his arrival was spreading quickly. More and more aliens appeared on the walkways, watching in silence, some whispering to each other. They entered a large chamber built around the base of the oldest tree Evan had ever seen. Its bark shimmered faintly as if light flowed through it like blood. At the far side of the chamber, sitting on a high seat carved into the wood, was a woman unlike any he had ever seen. She was tall, her posture regal, her skin the same pale blue as the stranger's butt with faint silver patterns across her face. Her hair flowed like strands of liquid gold, and her eyes were bright violet. She didn't speak at first. She simply studied Evan and the creature in his arms. Then her gaze shifted to the stranger. They exchanged a few quick words before she finally spoke in broken but clear English. You, human. You bring Moonflame back, she said, her voice smooth but carrying weight. Evan nodded slowly. I found it injured in the forest, he replied. I didn't know it belonged to you. Her eyes softened for the first time, but only slightly. Moonflame is not just pet, is bond companion, she said. Gift to me. From my mother, all new one in galaxy. Her gaze turned sharper. Hunters took Moonflame. You? Why risk life? Evan hesitated, not knowing how much to say, Because it needed help, he answered simply, and because I couldn't just walk away. A faint smile touched her lips, but it vanished quickly. She turned to the stranger, who gave a short report in their own language. From the tone, Evan guessed they were describing the hunters and how they had chased them. The princess's eyes narrowed. They will come again. They want Moonflame for ransom, she said. But you brought it back. You are in this now. Evan frowned. In this. You helped Moonflame. Now you are target, she said plainly. Hunters will not forget. Evan's mind spun. He had just wanted to help an injured creature. Now he was standing in the middle of some alien royal drama with enemies he'd never met. He glanced down at Moonflame, who was watching him with calm trust. The princess stood, her golden hair catching the light. You will stay here. For safety, she said. Lyra will guard you. She nodded toward the stranger. Evan finally had a name for them. He considered refusing. But then he remembered the orange-eyed hunters and the way they had moved through the forest like predators. Staying might be the only way to stay alive. Lyra gestured for him to follow, leading him through another set of bridges to a smaller dwelling built high in the trees. It was simple but warm, with glowing panels in the walls that gave off a soft light. Moonflame curled up on a raised platform, letting out a contented hum. Evan sat down on a low bench, his head resting in his hands. What have I gotten myself into? He muttered. Lyra stood near the entrance, her eyes scanning the forest beyond. You saved Moonflame, she said without turning. That means more than you know. Evan looked up at her. Then tell me, what am I not being told? She was silent for a moment, then finally said, Moonflame's life, tied to Princess. If Moonflame dies, Princess will weaken. She will not rule. Evan stared, the weight of her words sinking in. He hadn't just saved a pet, he had unknowingly protected the life of the ruler herself. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying faint sounds from far away. Lyra stiffened, her hand going to her weapon. Evan didn't hear anything at first, but then it came, a distant, steady clicking, growing louder with every heartbeat. The clicking grew louder, moving through the forest like a swarm. Lyra's eyes narrowed, and she motioned for Evan to stay quiet. She stepped out onto the small balcony, scanning the darkness between the trees. Faint flashes of orange light flickered in the distance. Moving quickly, Evan rose from the bench, his pulse speeding up. Is it them? He whispered. Lyra didn't answer, but the tightness in her jaw was enough. She pulled a small device from her belt and pressed it. A faint blue shield shimmered around the outer edges of the dwelling before fading from sight. Moonflame's ears twitched, and it let out a low, worried chirp. Evan moved closer, placing a hand on its soft fur. It's okay, he murmured. Though he wasn't sure he believed it, the noises outside were getting closer. Lyra stepped back inside, her voice low but firm. They are here, she said. We must move. Evan blinked. Move? Where? To the lower paths, she replied. They will search the high homes first. She grabbed a small pack and tossed it to him. Carry water, nothing else. Evan slipped the pack over his shoulders, still holding Moonflame close. The little creature seemed to sense the urgency, clinging to him without protest. Lyra opened a panel in the wall, revealing a narrow tunnel that sloped downward inside the tree. The air inside was damp and cool, the walls glowing faintly with natural bioluminescence. They moved quickly, the sound of footsteps and clicking above them growing faint for a moment. Then suddenly echoing from somewhere ahead, Lyra cursed softly in her own language and pulled Evan into a side passage. They pressed against the curved wall as two of the insect-headed hunters passed by, their spears glowing faintly, their eyes scanning the tunnel. Evan held his breath, Moonflame's body tense in his arms. When the hunters were gone, Lyra led him deeper, the tunnel opening into a hidden chamber at the base of the massive tree. Faint streams of water trickled down the walls, gathering into a pool in the center. The smell of wet earth filled the air. "We wait here until they pass," she whispered. Crouching near the pool, Evan sat down on a rock, adjusting Moonflame so it could rest more comfortably. The creature nuzzled into his chest, letting out a soft, steady hum, but they didn't get to wait long. The sound of something heavy landing outside the chamber made Lyra's head snap up. She drew her weapon, motioning for Evan to stay back. A shadow darkened the entrance, and then one of the hunters stepped in. Its orange eyes locking instantly onto Moonflame. It let out a sharp screech and lunged forward. Lyra met it halfway. Her blade clashing against the hunter's spear, sparks flying in the dim light. Evan scrambled backward, clutching Moonflame as another shadow moved outside, a second hunter stepping into view. Without thinking, Evan grabbed a fallen branch from the ground. It wasn't much, but when the second hunter tried to push past him, he swung hard, catching it across the helmet. The blow didn't drop it, but it made the alien stumble just enough for Lyra to slash the first one across the chest. Sending it crashing into the pool, Evan ducked as the second hunter swung its spear, the blade hissing past his head. Moonflame hissed sharply, its fur flaring with bright light. The flash was so sudden and intense that the hunter staggered back. Covering its eyes, Lyra took the opening, driving her blade into its side. Both hunters collapsed, the hum of their weapons fading. Lyra moved quickly, grabbing Evan's arm. "We must go now," she said. "More will come." They slipped out. Through a narrow gap at the back of the chamber, merging into the swamp beyond the city's edge. The air here was thick and humid, filled with the croaks and hisses of unseen creatures. Glowing plants swayed in the faint breeze. Asterisk, asterisk. Asterisk, asterisk. The ground was soft and uneven. Pools of murky water stretching between patches of solid earth. Evan followed Lyra carefully. Moonflame watching the shadows with wide eyes. Every step sank slightly into the wet ground. A sudden ripple in the water made Evan freeze. Something large moved beneath the surface. Circling slowly, Lyra stopped too, her eyes scanning the water. "Stay close," she said. Her voice tense. The ripples grew larger, and then a massive shape rose from the swamp. Its skin dark and wet, eyes glowing faint yellow. It opened a mouth full of jagged teeth and let out a low, rumbling growl. Lyra drew her weapon. But the beast was huge, its bulk blocking the narrow strip of land ahead. "We can't fight this," Evan said. "Not with Moonflame here." The creature stepped forward, the ground shaking slightly under its weight. Moonflame let out a strange, high-pitched trill. The beast froze for a moment, tilting its head as if recognizing the sound. Evan looked down in surprise. "Is it?" "Listening to you," he whispered to Moonflame. The little creature trilled again, louder this time, and the beast slowly backed into the water. Sinking beneath the surface without another sound, Lyra stared, clearly unsettled. "Moonflame has more power than I thought," she said quietly. They kept moving, the swamp stretching endlessly ahead, somewhere in the distance. Faint orange lights flickered again. The hunters were still searching, and Evan knew this night was far from over. Asterisk, the swamp seemed endless, each step sinking slightly into the wet ground. Evan's boots were heavy with mud, his arms aching from holding Moonflame for so long. But he refused to set the little creature down. Lyra moved ahead, her steps light and sure, scanning every shadow. The air was thick and warm, carrying the smell of rotting plants and something sharper underneath. A constant hum of insects surrounded them, broken only by the distant splash of unseen creatures slipping into the water. The faint glow of the alien city was far behind them now. Lyra stopped suddenly, raising a hand. Evan froze. His eyes searching the darkness, there was no sound of hunters. But the swamp itself seemed to shift. The water ahead rippled, though there was no wind. Lyra crouched, touching the ground with her fingers. "Something big," she murmured. A deep vibration passed through the earth, and Evan felt it in his legs. The ripples in the water became small waves. Then a massive shape began to rise. At first it looked like a mound of mud, but as it lifted higher, he saw the curve of a shell and thick limbs ending in claws the size of his arm. The creature's head emerged slowly, eyes glowing faint blue. It let out a low, bellowing sound that rolled through the swamp. Moonflame tensed in Evan's arms, but didn't make a sound. Lyra's weapon was already in her hand. Though she didn't attack, the giant swamp beast moved closer. Each step sending water sloshing around them. Its gaze fixed on Moonflame. Evan took a slow step back, but the creature matched him. The air felt charged. Like the moment before lightning struck, without warning, something else moved in the shadows, fast and deliberate. A spear shot through the air, striking the beast's shell with a dull crack. The swamp exploded into chaos. The beast roared, spinning toward the source of the attack. And 3 hunters emerged from the water, weapons raised. Lyra shouted something. In her language, her voice sharp, and charged forward, her blade flashing as she intercepted the first hunter. Evan turned to run, but another hunter landed in front of him, its orange eyes glowing brighter in the swamp's darkness. Moonflame hissed, its fur flaring with light. The glare made the hunter falter. Evan took the chance, shifting Moonflame to one arm and swinging his fist into the alien's jaw. The blow barely moved it, but it was enough to create an opening. He pushed past, splashing into deeper water, the cold mud sucking at his boots. Behind him, the beast roared again. Swiping one massive claw at the hunters, one was knocked aside with a splash, disappearing into the dark water. Lyra's movements were quick and precise, her blade cutting clean arcs through the air, each strike driving the hunters back. Evan scrambled onto a patch of higher ground, his breath ragged. Moonflame's glow dimmed as it nestled against him. He could hear the hunter's shouts and the beast's roars blending into a deafening mix. One of the hunters broke away from the fight, charging straight toward him. Evan grabbed a broken length of swampwood, holding it like a staff. The hunter swung its spear. Evan blocked clumsily, the impact jolting up his arms, but he didn't let go. He shoved back hard. Forcing the alien a step away, Lyra appeared from the side. Her blade flashing, the hunter fell, its weapon splashing into the mud. She grabbed Evan's arm. "Move," she said, her voice urgent. They ran again, the sounds of the battle fading behind them. The beast's roars growing distant. Lyra didn't slow until they reached a cluster of twisted trees rising from a dry patch of ground. Their roots formed a tangled wall, almost like a natural barrier. They pushed through a narrow gap and found a small hollow inside. The air here was cooler, the ground firm. Lyra knelt to catch her breath, her armor streaked with mud. "You fight." "Not bad," she said between breaths. Evan gave a tired laugh. "I just swing at whatever's trying to kill me," he replied. Moonflame stretched in his arms, then climbed onto his shoulder, its tail curling loosely around his neck. Lyra's gaze softened for a moment as she watched. "It trusts you," she said quietly. "More than I have seen with anyone but the princess." Evan looked at the small creature. It knows I won't hurt it," he said. Lyra's eyes flicked to the gap in the roots, her expression sharpening again. "We can't stay long. The hunters will follow." They rested for only a few minutes before moving again, weaving through more of the swamp. The trees growing thicker, the light dimmer. A fine mist clung to everything, making the ground slick. Evan's muscles ached, but he kept going. every step pushing them farther from danger, or at least he hoped. Hours seemed to pass before the ground began to rise, the swamp thinning into firmer forest. Somewhere ahead, Evan saw the faint outline of stone structures. Old and weathered, Lyra slowed, glancing back at him. Ancient place. Not safe, but better than swamp, she said. Evan followed her into the ruins. The stones covered in moss and strange alien carvings. The air here was cooler, carrying the scent of rain. Moonflame leaped from his shoulder onto a low wall, sniffing. At the carvings, Lyra watched it for a moment, then said, "These places hold old power. Some good, some not." She turned toward him, "But here, we can hide for the first time since leaving the city." Evan felt a small flicker of relief, though he knew it wouldn't last. Somewhere out in the swamp, the hunters were still moving, and when they found the trail again, there would be no walls, ancient or not, that could keep them out. The ruins were quiet, too quiet. The air inside the broken walls felt heavy, like it was holding old secrets. Evan stepped carefully, his boots crunching on bits of stone and roots that had pushed through the floor. Moonflame stayed close, hopping from rock to rock, its glowing eyes scanning the shadows. Lyra moved ahead, her blade ready, her steps silent. They entered what might have once been a large hall. Tall columns still stood, though some leaned at strange angles. Faint light spilled in through cracks in the ceiling, dust drifting slowly in the beams. Evan glanced at the carvings on the walls, strange twisting shapes and symbols that seemed to shift if he stared too long. Lyra's voice was low. "This place was built before our people had a king. Before even the princess's line," she said. "Some say it is cursed." Evan gave a faint, tired smile. "Great. Exactly where I wanted to spend the night." She didn't smile back. Her attention locked on the far end of the hall, where an archway led into deeper darkness. She stepped forward, testing the floor with her boot. "Stay close," she said. They moved through the arch into a narrower space, the air cooler here, carrying the faint smell of water. Somewhere deeper, a steady dripping echoed, the sound unnaturally loud. Evan's foot brushed against something metal. He crouched and picked it up, a small rusted device, too old to work, but still strange to see in such an ancient place. Lyra took it from him, frowning. "Hunters have been here before," she said. "They search for relics too." A faint sound reached them, soft, but sharp enough to make Lyra stop. She tilted her head, listening. Evan strained his ears. At first he heard only the dripping water, then clicking, faint and far, but moving closer. Lyra motioned for him to move quickly. They slipped through another passage into a side chamber, this one smaller, with only one entrance. Moonflame leaped into Evan's arms, its fur prickling with light. The clicking grew louder, joined by a low hum. Evan's heart beat faster. Lyra flattened herself against the wall beside the entrance. Gripping her weapon, the first shadow appeared in the doorway, tall, with glowing orange eyes. One of the hunters stepped in, scanning the room before it could see them. Lyra moved, her blade flashing. The alien fell with a wet hiss, its weapon clattering to the floor, but the sound echoed, and more footsteps followed. Evan backed toward the far wall, Moonflame's glow pulsing in rhythm with its rapid breathing. The second hunter charged in, this one faster. Evan grabbed the fallen spear, its handle strangely warm. The alien lunged, and Evan thrust the spear forward, the tip crackling with energy as it struck the hunter's chest. The alien collapsed, but the hum from the weapon grew louder. Lyra's eyes widened. "It will call the others," she said sharply. "We must move." They bolted through a side crack in the wall, forcing their way into another corridor, the sound of pursuit quick behind them. Evan's legs burned, his breath coming hard. Lyra stayed just ahead, Guiding them through the maze of ancient passages, they burst into an open courtyard. The ceiling gone, moonlight spilling across cracked stone. A dry fountain stood in the center. Its carvings worn, but still faintly glowing. Moonflame squirmed in Evan's arms and leaped down, landing on the edge of the fountain. It placed its small paws on the stone and let out a long, steady trill. The glow from the fountain flared brighter, light spilling across the courtyard. The hunters froze at the edges, their eyes flickering. Evan stared in disbelief. What is it doing? Lyra's voice was almost reverent. It is calling the old guardians. The ground beneath the fountain shifted. A deep rumble rolling through the stone, cracks split the floor. And from them rose shaped stone figures, tall and faceless. Their bodies covered in the same strange carvings. They moved with slow, deliberate steps, placing themselves between Evan, Lyra, Moonflame, and the hunters. The hunters hesitated, their clicking calls sharp with alarm. One tried to push forward, but a stone guardian struck, the impact sending the alien crashing into a wall. The others began to retreat, fading into the shadows. When the courtyard was silent again, the guardians turned to face Moonflame, bowing their heads before slowly sinking back into the ground. The fountain's glow faded to its normal faint shimmer. Evan exhaled, his arms still tense. I guess that answers how important this little one is, he said. Lyra nodded, her eyes on Moonflame. It is not just the princess's bond companion, she said. It is key to the old power. Power my people swore never to awaken again, Evan frowned, and the hunters. They know. They know enough, Lyra said. That is why they will never stop. They left the courtyard quietly, moving toward the far side of the ruins. The night was nearly over, but Evan had the uneasy feeling that daylight would not bring safety. Moonflame trotted ahead now, as if it knew the way, its tail swaying gently. Evan looked at Lyra. If it's that important, what happens if they get it? Lyra's face was grim. If they take Moonflame, they can break the princess's bond, weaken her until the throne falls, and whoever controls the old power will control more than just our people. Evan tightened his grip on the spear he still carried. Then we can't let that happen. Lyra glanced at him, a faint spark of respect in her eyes. No, we can't, she said. And they kept walking into the dark. Dawn came slowly. Pale light spilling across the ruins. The mist clung to the stones, wrapping everything in a ghostly haze. Evan's shoulders ached from the long night, but he kept moving. Lyra walked ahead, scanning every corner. Moonflame trotted between them, its tail curling lightly with each step. The forest beyond the ruins was waking. Alien birds called from high branches, and somewhere far off, the low rumble of the swamp echoed. Evan tried to focus on the path, but the unease in his chest wouldn't fade. Lyra felt it too, her pace quickening, her eyes narrowing. They had nearly reached the edge of the ruins when the air shifted. A faint vibration running through the ground. Moonflame froze, its ears twitching. Lyra stopped too, her voice low. They're here. Shapes emerged from the mist, tall and dark. The hunters, but this time there were more. At least a dozen, their glowing orange eyes cutting through the haze. At the center of the group was a figure larger than the rest. Its armor black and jagged, its eyes burning brighter than fire. Evan's grip tightened on the stolen spear. Lyra stepped slightly in front of him, her blade raised. The leader of the hunters spoke in a deep, harsh voice, the words unknown to Evan but heavy with command. Lyra's reply was sharp, her tone defiant. The leader's gaze shifted to Moonflame, and the creature hissed, its fur glowing faintly. Without warning, the hunters spread out, surrounding them. The leader stepped forward, its weapon glowing with a deep red light. Evan's heart pounded. He could feel the tension in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks. The first hunter. Lunged, Lyra moved to block, her blade clashing with the spear. Sparks flying, Evan swung his own weapon, catching another hunter across the side. Moonflame darted between their legs, its glow flaring bright, disorienting the attackers for precious seconds. But the leader was different. It moved with speed and precision. Every strike aimed to drive them back. Lyra was forced to give ground, her breathing growing heavier. Evan tried to flank the leader, but it blocked him with one quick motion, the red glow from its weapon searing his eyes. Moonflame leaped onto a fallen column, its eyes locking on the leader. It let out a sharp trill, the sound piercing the air. The leader froze for a heartbeat, and Lyra took the chance. Her blade cutting deep into its side, the alien roared, spinning to strike her. Evan didn't think. He threw himself forward, driving the spear into the leader's arm. The impact sent a shock up his arms, the weapon crackling with energy. The leader staggered, but it didn't fall. Instead, it grabbed Evan by the front of his shirt. Lifting him from the ground, the world blurred. For a moment, then a voice cut through the chaos, a clear, commanding voice. Evan twisted in the leader's grip and saw her, the princess, stepping out of the mist with a squad of royal guards, her golden hair catching the morning light, her violet eyes locked on the leader. She spoke in her own language, the tone sharp. As a blade, the leader hesitated, its grip on Evan loosening. Moonflame jumped down and ran to her, pressing its glowing head against her leg. The princess placed a hand gently on it, her gaze never leaving the leader. The hunters shifted uneasily, their formation breaking. The princess took a slow step forward, her voice calm but unyielding. The leader's eyes flicked to the guards, then back to her. It growled low, but finally lowered its weapon. One by one, the hunters stepped back into the mist, their glowing eyes fading until only the ruins remained. Evan stumbled to his feet, breathing hard. Lyra wiped her blade clean, her gaze still fixed on the fog where the hunters had gone. The princess approached, her expression softer now. "You kept Moonflame safe," she said, her English careful but clear. "You fought when you could run." Evan glanced at Lyra, then back at her. "I wasn't going to leave it behind," he said. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You are friend of the throne," she said, her voice carrying both gratitude and formality. "You will be welcome here. Always." Moonflame leaped into Evan's arms one last time, nuzzling against his chest before climbing onto the princess's shoulder. It looked back at him, letting out a soft, almost content chirp. Evan felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. He had only known the little creature for a short time, but it had felt like more. Lyra stepped closer, her voice low. "You did more than you know." The princess turned, her guards forming a protective circle around her as they moved back toward the city. Moonflame glanced over its shoulder again, the soft glow of its fur fading into the mist. Evan stood there for a long moment, the quiet settling in, when Lyra finally spoke again. There was a trace of respect in her tone. "You should rest. But be ready," she said. "Hunters like that do not give up." "And you're part of this now?" Evan gave a small, tired smile. "Then I guess I'll be ready," he replied, and together they walked toward the rising sun, the swamp, and ruins behind them, but the bond they had formed and the danger they now shared still ahead.